Looking forward to Easter. It's going to be a hot one, and then we're going to have a great summer after that, I'm sure, with plenty of networking opportunities. Ula, some involving sport and competition, others not. But of course, networking opportunities give us opportunities to meet, socialize, advance, build networks, etc. And if you're anything like me, they make me scared. I'm not comfortable. I don't like them. And that might surprise some of you who think I'm an extrovert. I'm not. I hate those situations. But Amelie is one of our great friends and member. I know most of you know her. Has got some tips to share with us around networking and how to do it. It's networking for introverts, networking for people like me. Amelie, thank you for this session. Before I pass over to Amelie, I should have said, can everybody see the chat? Has everybody got access to the chat? And can you see a link in there?
I think I'll have to look afterwards. I'm on an iPhone.
I'll just repost it.
Repost it, yeah.
Okay.
I just,
yes, please.
If you've joined since it was put in the chat, you may not be seeing it. So Kate is going to repost. Amelie.
Yeah,
it's
thanks,
that
guys.
time. Over to you.
My time. Thank you, guys. So I'll explain a little bit in a few minutes why I wanted to set up this session with you all. But in the meantime, I want this to be a very collaborative session, and just as a bit of an icebreaker and just to get a feel for how people feel about networking, I've created a bit of a Slido poll. So if you just click on the link that Katie has sent, the www.slido, and then on the top, you should see a little search bar. You just need to, next to the hashtag, put network intro. Is going to take you to a poll asking you how networking makes you feel in one word, and we'll be able to see the results live. So I'm going to screen share right now to see what everybody's answering.
Could you say it again? Network, what's the hashtag?
Hashtag is network intro.
Intro, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Some good results.
Okay.
Here we go. All right.
What can make you feel?
Yeah. Scared and worried and comfortable. Upbeat. Okay, good. We've got some positives. Uncertain, intimidated. Okay. Let's just get a few more. Energized. Okay. All right. So we've got 2 positives, upbeat, energized, and the rest express quite a bit of discomfort. There is no consensus. Everyone's voted different things, which is quite interesting. Obviously, it's a smaller crowd, so I don't expect the same things to come up many times, but it is good. So we've got a mix of good and bad feeling here. I'm gonna stop sharing, and it's really interesting to see. And basically, the one key message I want to start with is that you're not alone feeling that way, and clearly you've joined this workshop, so something you're interested in. So we'll address quite a few things today, but before I kick off, I just want to explain why I've set up this workshop. And my personal story is not hugely different from many of the personal stories you've heard before. But basically, about 2 years ago, having worked in the same company for about 10 years, my internal network was really good, but my external network was completely non-existent. And networking for me was a bit of a nice to have, but it's not something I was really inclined to doing. My vision of a networking event was a big room with lots of people, kind of awkward, kind of draining as well. And I just never bothered actually throwing myself into that because opportunities were just arising naturally in my workplace. The trigger for me was the lockdown. And in the lockdown, I joined EGW and I realized that everyone joined and started participating and engaging virtually. So that was a medium with which I was significantly more comfortable with. And I started engaging quite a bit. So I joined the events, I showed up, I started approaching people separately. And I decided to do a bit of a research and speak to as many EGW members as possible. And I identified my EGW member as my peer group. And I wanted to find out if everybody was feeling the same way as I did. So the question I was asking EGW members is, how do you feel about networking in the traditional sense? And how do you feel about the hybrid approach to networking? And what was really interesting is that out of the 20 women I spoke to, only 2 told me, I absolutely love networking. I live and breathe for it. 18 out of the 20 interviewees told me they hate it. It's daunting. It's horrible. I'm just reading some of the quotes. So there's something that networking makes people feel it's just not overly positive. But it was also issues with the time constraints and the format. I'm too busy. I'm mostly working. I have to leave networking events early because I've got, family and kids. I'm glued to my desk all day long. I just can't do that. I just can't take time away to network face to face. So there were a lot of issues with that. But also, as introverts and ambiverts, I thought there are huge opportunities engaging virtually. Because for the first time, it's not about who's the loudest in the room. It's about showing up, and it's about embracing those inner qualities as introverts and ambiverts. For the first time in a long time, we had a space to engage, whereas in the past we've always been drowned out by extroverts. So I thought it was really interesting. It was really an opportunity. So what is this workshop about? It's not about networking, learning how to network like extroverts. There are plenty of extroverts out there who have workshops, presentation, and they are essentially telling everybody else to emulate their own approach to networking, to work the room, to have the elevator pitch, to exchange business cards to as many people as possible in the room. I never felt that this was a method that would work for me. I am an ambivert, I am sociable, but I am drained out after too much social interaction. So this workshop is not about telling you how to be an extrovert. It's about finding a methodology that works for you as an ambivert and as an introvert. Before I carry on, so this was my why. And before I carry on, I just, again, want to make it clear that it's a very collaborative session. So please do interrupt, please jump in, say how you feel. Actually, we've got a comment from Louise. Yeah, I feel overwhelmed with large group. Find it hard to join groups already engaging with each other. Yeah, that's one of the key issue with networking event. So we'll address that in a few minutes.
Amelie, you mentioned that kind of it heightened during lockdown, and something that I've noticed in myself is since lockdown, I feel a bit like you in the sense that I'm happy to network and I'm okay at networking, but there's kind of a limit on how much I can do now. It's kind of, I get to the point, a couple of hours in when you just think, oh, I'm exhausted, or I've run out of things to say. And maybe I didn't think about it before the pandemic, but I'm definitely more aware of it now, that there's kind of, I just feel quite overwhelmed after a period of time.
Yeah,
I'm not sure whether that's because we had 2 years out of not really communicating and there wasn't really an awful lot to talk about. So, but I'm just more aware of it now.
Yeah, and it's really important to be aware of this aspect of your personality. because understanding what drives you, what energizes you, and what depletes you as well is really important. And I think the lockdown was a big revenge of introverts and ambiverts. For the first time, the noise was cancelled out. It was a difficult time for many of us, but at the same time, it was also creating an environment where suddenly we could find a voice within all of that noise. So first, why networking? You know, it's always shown, it's always spoken about as a must-have and it's a must-do. And personally, I've always dismissed it, but I've dismissed it because I was uncomfortable with networking. And also, I've always been told that it was very important, but nobody had ever articulated why it was so important. So I want to introduce you to something called the PIE model. So PIE model, so PIE stands for P for performance, I for image, and E for exposure. So the PIE model tells you what combination of these three components are important for professional success. So can you guys give me your idea of the breakdown, if you take a pie of 100, between performance, image, and exposure in that order? What do you think is more important? Where would you see the breakdown? Would it be 50-50, 0, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Please pop in the chat what you think it is.
Give me the three again, Amelie. I'll just note them down.
Performance, image, and exposure. Recipe for professional success. What's the breakdown between the three for 100? And what would be your breakdown, Katie, in terms of percentage of contribution? Okay, 40, 20, 40. Interesting. Before being told about it, I was roughly 70 performance. Myself, I was 70 performance, and then the rest was broken down between the two. Yeah. Mark, image 60, exposure 30, performance 10. Marion's also 40, 20, 40. Okay. So actually, so there's a bit of it's been conceptualized and it's been looked into, but the breakdown between the three is performance only accounts for 10% of your professional success. Image accounts for 20, and exposure accounts for 70, which is really incredible when you think about this, 70% on exposure. And you're not getting exposure if you're not putting yourself out there, if you're not actively networking. So I thought it was important to just address why it's important. So I appreciate it's a theory, but it's also been looked into. And coming into this exercise, I had 0 exposure. And really, I was focusing everything on performance, which is great, but it's very hard to have consistent and repeated performance at work every single year. And it's also kind of draining to just aim for the top every single year as well. So maybe there are other ways to actually get to career progression without being constantly under pressure to perform. So I'm going to screen share for a second because I would like to show you the motives for networking, which I identified during this research which I did with E2W member. I'm just gonna hide the slideshow. Let me do the slideshow. Actually, let me just, can you see my screen properly right now?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So not everybody starts at the same level when we start networking, just because the trigger for networking can be very different. And I think Katie and Mark, you've experienced that during the lockdown. A lot of women joined E2W member because became E2W members because during the lockdown, they lost their job or they were struggling with mental health. And suddenly it was very, very important for them to get support to help them through these tough times. So that's what I mean when I mean level of urgency. When you start networking and you're in that last category, I mean, it's really urgent for you to get a support network very, very quickly. So the pressure is larger when you start at that stage. Myself, I was on the left-hand side. I joined ETW, I ticked a box. I'd been told it was needed, but I wasn't exactly sure why or what I was going to get out of networking. So that's not ideal either. When you start at that level, ideally you want to move to more fulfilling types of activities. In the middle of the range is kind of the sweet spot. So if you just want to, find out what your peers are up to, you can start networking. There's no time pressure. You can just dip in and out depending on what you're interested in. When you start actually networking for professional reasons, say you're in business development or you are in a visible position, it's becoming more urgent and you need to be really more active with your networking activities. So where actually, let me ask the audience, where are you guys in the scale of networking? Where do you think you are? Are you in number 1, is like not really sure what they're doing here? Or are you in 4, it's more urgent and you really need support? Or is it 2 or 3? Can you pop in the chat where you guys think you are? Okay. Okay. Majority of 2, we had a 3. No 4, that's good. Louise will try to get you to 2 and 3. To Harrison, my husband has joined us. Mark, you're 3 and 4. Okay, you're 4. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I suppose. Mark, you're always looking for work, right? You're muted. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a variety. Oh, Shamini, you're 2. Okay, that's good. Shamini is my mentee. It's nice to see you. Okay. Okay, good. So very few 1s, very few 4s as well. So it looks like everyone is in the middle category, which is kind of the sweet spot. So I'll introduce you to another concept, which I have come up with. So there are levels of urgencies, but there are also levels of trust, which you need to establish when you're engaging with your peers. So I'm just gonna, and I've called them the 3 I's. So when you're engaging with your peers, really what you're targeting is the 3 I's: inspiration, information, and introduction. That's the holy trinity of what you're looking to achieve when you're networking. So when you're in 1 or 2, you might be predominantly focused on inspiration. You just want to talk to people who are doing things that you think are challenging or interesting. You want to find out what they're up to, how they got there. And those people will volunteer information more easily, or they will be quite happy to provide that sort of inspirational journey for you, because there's no pressure on them. It's just time constraint. You might ask for half an hour from them and they'll happily tell you about their life stories. Everybody is always very happy to tell you about their life stories. Don't forget that. But when you start moving towards the right-hand side of the scale, you're probably after harder to get bits such as information. So you need to have a bit of a trust established when you're engaging. People will not necessarily volunteer information immediately. You need to establish a bit of a trust. But introduction, really, that's the hardest to get, because when somebody is introducing you to someone else, that means that they're vouching for you to someone in their network. So you already need to have quite a significant bit of trust established. So I want you to remember these 3 I's when you're networking. When you're approaching someone, what is it that you're after, and where can you go realistically based on your relationship with that person? Are you already in that introduction phase, or are you starting at the beginning of the journey? It's quite important not to jump to the introduction phase too quickly, because you don't have the trust yet. You haven't established a relationship.
Can I just jump in and ask a question?
Of course, please do so.
Just to make sure I understand, the inspiration and information introduction, the 3 I's, the place, the position you place them, I mean, are they in relation to these different levels of urgency, or are they completely independent?
Well,
do you know what I mean?
They're not, yeah, no, I see what you mean. I think they're not fully independent. You could overlap them. When you're looking for work and you need mental health support, I mean, inspiration will help you, information will help you as well, but what you need is to expand your network very quickly. So you'd probably need a bit more introduction. You need people to say, hey, why don't you reach out to this other person? You know, it's not set in stone, but it's clear that when you're at the beginning of your journey, you're probably not at the stage looking for introductions. You're probably looking for inspiration because you're trying to move into a more meaningful way of engaging, which really, by the way, meaningful engagement with your peers, it's what networking should be called. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's what it should be. And networking, there's so much negative connotation associated with the word networking. It feels shallow, it sometimes feels formal, it feels forced. I want you to rewire your perception of networking towards something more positive, so meaningful engagement with your peers. Nobody externally is ever going to call it that. It's still called networking, but that's what it should be. You're looking for depth. You're not looking for numbers necessarily. As an introvert or an ambivert, if you go for numbers, you're going to be exhausted. So you're looking for those meaningful connections, and you might go back to these same connections over and over again because you get that mutual energization from the conversations you're having.
Thank you.
Have I answered your question? I feel like sort of.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. I'm sort of digressing a little bit, but please do continue to interrupt because again, it's a collaborative session. I'm going to stop screen sharing and going back to how to start networking or how to get more comfortable with it. And whether you're doing a virtual event or whether you're doing a face-to-face event, it's very important to prepare before you start engaging. And after you engage, it's very important to retreat, because that retreat process is when you will get your energy levels back up. Extroverts, they can go through the engaging level in a loop. They'll be quite happy. They don't need to prepare. They don't need to retreat. They'll get that constant boost of energy from just being with others and engaging with others. But as introverts and ambiverts, the preparation phase is important, but the retreat phase is even more important. I'm going to stop there because Louise has asked a question. How do you start engaging with colleagues unless there's a specific reason? Yeah, that's a good one. Internal networks are actually a great place to start because you're already, I mean, it's not fully a safe space, but it's already a space you're familiar with. So what I found the most effective is to join committees. I know sometimes it can be death by committees, but generally in most big firms, there's lots of committees going on. We've got the diversity and inclusion stream. That's a great way to meet people. And actually it's a great way to meet diverse colleagues across the organization. But that's where I would start. And actually it acts like a nice icebreaker. So by being engaged in those committees, you start forming relationships which may help you for your day job down the line. And that's happened with me multiple times. We have lean-in circles at my firm. So there are groups of women, and they're small groups, about between 6 and 8 of us in each group. And they're really brilliant because they're kind of a safe space within the organization. Nali, you've got your hand up. Nice to see you, by the way.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well, Amelie. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I agree with what you're saying about joining different committees, because I joined LNG, as you know, just under a year ago. Immediately, I was involved with a few of the committees. That really helped me to just get set up to the company, and also with my jobs, because a lot of the people in those committees are people I have working relationships with. So when you actually reach out to them, it's quite simple because they already know who you are. They've seen your face. And it just makes that working relationship a lot better. So you're not just cold calling on people when you need favors, but it just makes it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing things together, which I think is also quite important. Because the issue with networking is that sometimes it's just a little bit too much of a talk, but when you start working on things together, it really creates that extra bond. And really, again, networking is always seen as this shallow, let's have a chat, let's exchange business cards, and then let's talk again in 6 months when something comes up. But when you start aiming for that depth and getting involved in things, that's when you it's more time consuming, but it's extremely fulfilling. Yeah, Ula, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I thought I could I'll try to add to it as well, where I found, having joined UBS during lockdowns, my manager was very helpful in saying, here's a list of people you should connect with to understand different parts of the business, and also just to get to know a few more people, which I felt was very helpful with internal networking. I appreciate that not all team leaders or line managers might be offering it out, but I think there is nothing wrong with asking your manager, who are the people I should be speaking with, and depending on how you feel about reaching out to them on your own, or asking your line manager, would you mind dropping an email and just connecting us. And I think that makes it much easier mentally, but I think it can be helpful both ways.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think
it's obvious when you say it, but not everybody thinks of it. Yeah. And especially during the lockdown, it's easy to forget about, you know what, we keep referring to the lockdown, but let's be clear here. Most of us are now operating under a hybrid environment. So I got a direct report this year, and I've probably met him face to face, I don't know, probably under 10 times. That probably tells me I should go to the office more, but I just can't get to that level yet, because I've enjoyed being at home so much as an ambivert that I'm reluctant to go back to the office too much because I find it really draining. But you're absolutely right. We do forget about new joiners under that environment. It's very important to help them and ask for help as well.
Yeah, and also to add to it, because I felt in the beginning, I felt guilty thinking, what have I got to offer? I'm benefiting from it, but actually there is a lot we can offer, whether we are new to a firm or have been there for a while. Not always everyone knows what you're doing and what your part of the business is doing. So there's a lot of benefits you can bring in by networking like this and by explaining what your team does and how you can help, the rest of the business.
And let's face it, most of it might be a virtual catch up, because I don't know about you guys, but if I want to catch up with one specific person, aligning the days in the office is really hard. So, once in a while, it's like, are you in the office? Are you in the office? No, you're not. Oh, I'm not today. And then I just can never catch up. So we just have to keep advocating for this hybrid model as introverts and ambiverts. And we have to keep advocating for virtual networking as well. And I know everyone wants to go back to the face-to-face, but ultimately for us, it's gonna catch on, and we're gonna be depleted of energy. And so I think it's very important that we hold the fort, and we also continue to embrace virtual networking, because for us, it really gives us the headspace, the safe space that we need to maintain those energy levels high. Mark, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Thanks, Amelie. Just say a couple of points, if I may. and going back to performance, image, and exposure, let's not forget performance was the smallest proportion of the pie chart, and research shows that women are more likely to give that a lot higher score than men. Yeah. You're more inclined to be waiting for somebody to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, well done, fantastic. Which means, as women, you need to get over that, and you need to start worrying more about exposure than performance. The other thing is, we're talking obviously here about networking, and typically when we think about networking, we're thinking about big rooms full of people. Yeah. I hate big rooms full of people. What I tend to do is I try and find somebody who looks like me, and if you see me at E2W events, if David Ward turns up, because his name's David and is a he, I will probably spend most of the night talking to him. Because I'm in my comfort zone, and that might be strange for some. You might be strange for you to hear as somebody who spends all of their life, talking to and supporting women. I am much more comfortable talking to David than I am any of you, and I suspect you do the same. So I tend not to, when I think about networking, I tend not to think about those big rooms. Because I know I'm not comfortable in them. So I look for other opportunities to reach out to people all the time. I'm just looking for opportunities where I can reach out to somebody on a one-to-one basis. And as E2W members, a lot of, some of you on the call, and indeed, the wider membership, a lot of you have progressed in your careers, changed roles, changed jobs through networking with the community. And I'd say, there's the membership platform. When I look at the membership platform and see how many of you are reaching out to each other or connecting with each other, it's really very few. I put on WhatsApp a few weeks ago, I'm in London, who wants a coffee? And Nolly reached out. You should be doing that all the time, because it is, I'm here and want a coffee, or somebody turn up, or just look all the time for those. If you don't like big spaces like me, find small spaces, find opportunities. Every time you see somebody, look for that one-on-one opportunity and think, what can I do for them? What can they do for me? And I think we need to do more of that. Sorry, I'm sounding like I'm preaching.
No, but you're right.
It's my thoughts.
No, you're absolutely right. So first of all, thank you for mentioning the fact that women tend to assign a bigger score to performance. That's absolutely true. So we need to remember that when we're thinking about the PIE model. And second of all, yes, you're right. It's hard to keep the discipline about networking. And I'm here preaching about it, but I don't have the discipline either. What I'm doing today, to me, is my way of networking. It's my way of gaining that exposure. I'm not talking to you individually, but I think I've actually probably spoken to most of you in the past. I might remember a few of you who I've not spoken to. And what I would do is that I would probably reach out to you. But it's maintaining that discipline. But I think, Mark, it's important to remember that we need to network in our own terms. So if coming into the office and being spontaneous and grabbing coffee is not the way that we're operating anymore, because there's just too much going on when we're in the office, is full on. Everybody wants to talk to us. When I'm in the office, I can't network because I'm knackered. I spend most of my time having coffee and talking to my colleagues. So it's important to find a format that works for us consistently. So we've touched on impact. Oh yeah, Nolly, sorry, you want to say something?
Oh, sorry, Amelie. I was just going to say about what you're saying about finding a suitable style and not giving up on virtual networking, because going back to what you're saying earlier, if you've got like children and stuff at home, the virtual networking still works best. So I'm very much pro networking virtually and in person. That's number one. And then number two, I don't know if you've all touched on this, but how we can maximize, I guess, the use of LinkedIn. Because I think during the lockdown, a lot of us were reaching out to people and stuff via LinkedIn. But I don't know about you, but as we've gone back to normal, I'm kind of inching away from LinkedIn, and also just wondering whether other people are still using LinkedIn and so forth, and if there's any tips.
Yeah, LinkedIn is an interesting one. Can you guys pop into the chat whether you love it or hate it?
What if we've got a love-hate relationship with
You can have that. Yeah, Katie as well. Okay, love hate.
Me
Oh, it's okay.
been spending too much time together, obviously.
Okay, love, good. Wow, okay. Love and hate. Okay, good. Yeah, it's not even like Marmite. Like some days we love it, some days we hate it. Before I started networking, I just hated it. But the more I started using it, the more I loved it, because it gave me so much exposure. Like just posting about this workshop, I had about 50 likes in 24 hours. That was incredible. And that's giving me the exposure that I need with very little time commitment from me, which is exactly what you want. You want the best bang for your buck. So try to embrace the platform. Be careful, because your employer is watching your moves. So if you're liking a competitor's post or something like that, you can get into trouble. You have to be really, really, really careful with LinkedIn. But it is still a great platform where you can get exposure by not doing very much, just engaging. But it is social media. It is a bit crap at some point, in some instances. But it's also very good to get the exposure. Like people think I'm starting a business because I'm doing a workshop with you guys. Like it's funny. So don't underestimate how powerful LinkedIn is. And the more you'll use it, the more you'll love it. I can guarantee you that. It's a bit awkward to message people directly still. I find that they're more likely to respond if you comment on one of their posts or if you engage with them, rather than direct messages, which tend to be for people trying to sell us stuff or recruiters. Really.
Well, I was just going to ask that, Amelie, if you were going to connect with someone and typically write a note, would you, what would you say? Would you say why you're connecting with them, or
so sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. I think it's got to do with your level of connection. If you're a second degree connection, I think you can add a note, but if you're third degree, you may not, or something like that. So I find that it's hit or miss. I've tried to connect with people who I hadn't spoken to before, and they've just ignored me, and some of them have responded. But I think it's easier where you find yourself within the same group or networking group or in the same event. It's a more effective icebreaker.
Yeah. And I guess for the people that liked your post yesterday, for example, you can, if you're not connected with them, you can connect and say thanks for the like. It'll be great to keep in touch, and that's such an easy way to
much more easy. Ula?
I was going to comment on Katie's question, and I would I get connection requests from many people, and it made me realize that how I feel when I get a request without a message, from random person. There is really, unless this person looks on their profile like my prospective client, I found that I don't know what the connection is, so I might not accept the connection. Whereas definitely, if I get a message explaining, why they've reached out to me, whatever reason it is, then I will most probably accept it. So I try to do the same when I'm connecting to people I found on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's all about going back to that trust. People who who you've never spoken to, who reach out to you directly on LinkedIn and add you. Basically, they're looking for an introduction to yourself without having the established trust. So it's not necessarily the most effective way, but sometimes there's just no other option. So moving away from LinkedIn, maybe. So we've covered the virtual ways of engaging. We've spoken about reaching out to people. Like, for example, this is the perfect platform for you to reach out to each other, you know, write down each other's name and maybe talk to each other, connect on the ETW platform or LinkedIn or whatever. I would really encourage you to do that. It's much easier when you start a conversation with someone saying, hey, you've been to the same event. What did you think of it? It's a very effective icebreaker. But this is an icebreaker you can also use for a face-to-face event. And Mark, going back to your point of finding the person who looks the most like you in the room and just talking to that person for a long time, I think we have to remember that most people are deeply uncomfortable with big rooms full of people. And I think it's important. It's not obvious because networking event people are loud, people may be drinking. I know I become very loud when I'm drinking, and people think I'm an extrovert, but trust me, I really come crashing down after such events. Try to remember, if you're feeling uncomfortable, try to remember that most people in the room are introverts or ambiverts. Very few people are actually full-blown extroverts. So if they're in the room and unless they're, you know, in a corner with someone just on a one-on-one conversation, if they're in a bigger group or if they're looking for the cheese board, just reach out to them. They'll be grateful for you to reach out to them, because in all likelihood, they're probably trying to keep themselves busy until they find someone to talk to. So just go and reach out to them. The worst thing that can happen is that they don't really want to talk, which is a bit odd because they're at a networking event. I mean, they should be willing to talk. Or what can happen, and that's something that has come up when I interviewed ETW members, is that sometimes those networking events where there are a lot of salespeople can be horrible because they're trying to sell you something. So if within 5 minutes or even less than that, 30 seconds of the conversation, they realize they're not a client, you're not a client for them, they will just walk away. And that feels like rejection. But it shouldn't be perceived that way. It's got nothing to do with you. It's just this person is trying to sell you something and you're not a potential client. Move on. It doesn't have to be always transactional when you're at a networking event. So one of the elements that you need to prepare for when you're going to an event, and you go back to the prepare, engage, retreat, the preparation work is also psychological. Prepare for rejection because it might happen, but it doesn't matter. There's plenty of fish in the sea and there's plenty of wonderful people to engage with. That's what you need to remember.
That's something I wanted to mention as well. So naturally, I thought I was an introvert, etc. But I've discovered networking many years ago, and since then I live and breathe with networking. But it comes back to your inspiration, information, and introduction. What I find, what I don't like is people who go networking on a mission. And you feel it when people come to you and they have a goal, and it's whether it's urgent or not urgent, whatever, that is uncomfortable and not what networking should be for. What I discover in networking is that it's meeting new people, interesting people. It's the opportunity to discover new personalities, new people. Might bring you nothing from a job perspective, and it doesn't matter, but they might bring you ideas, inspiration on anything. And then, or maybe they might have an idea which comes up there and which makes you think, oh, actually, this makes me think of that. And then the opportunity, oh, I'm going to talk to that other person, which has nothing to do with it, but it's just the new ideas, the new people. So I feel like I don't like this idea of, yes, I need to network and I'm on a mission and I don't know how you prepare, etc. But there is an element of preparation in my job where I didn't need to think, yes, I need to talk to these kind of people to at least know what they're thinking. But it's to go and discover people, get information, and discover engaging people. And once again, as you said, if these people are not interested in talking to you, it's their loss.
No, I totally
Because
agree.
I'm not trying to sell you anything or to push anything on you. I'm interested in you as a person. I'll come to you as a person because I want to know more. If you don't want to talk to me, then then it's fine. I will never do business anyway with you in these conditions.
And I think you're right. And I think we need to split the term networking between two camps, really. There's selling and there's engaging. So when you get to the selling stage, it's not really networking anymore. It's selling, right? And it's the later stages of networking. It's more urgent. It's more business driven. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But ideally for us, we want to be in the engaging phase, which is more a discovery, getting to know people.
Yeah. And that the question is, when you are introvert and you feel like I need to network, can you get excited about going to see people just to discover people for the sake of it, or is it already a struggle?
Yeah, and it's the preparation work. If you find the prospects of going to a networking event too daunting because you don't feel that your headspace is there, you don't feel good in your head and your body for one reason or another, then maybe you just shouldn't go. Don't force yourself. You should actually feel excited about going to a networking event. And if you're not feeling excited, just pass. There'll be plenty of opportunities. And now we can do it virtually. So, you know, if there was someone you wanted to talk to, reach out to them and then catch up with them individually. So yeah, no, totally agree. And again, this is why the retreat phase of networking is so important to us, because Lilia, I'm like Louis. So when I speak to a lot of people, I get lots of ideas. I get 50 ideas every minute. It's exhausting to my husband. Sorry, Rustam. And then I talk to many people and then I get ideas and connection. But when I go to a face-to-face event where I have 20 of these conversations, what I do is that sometimes I'm so depleted and I feel I've done so much of networking that I actually don't take a lot of action. I don't have a clear view on my takeaway points. And that's when we fall on our swords as introverts and ambiverts. We get tired, we lose our energy levels. So the retreat phase should not be underestimated. And really it should be a target you have before you start engaging face to face. Before this networking event, I need to retreat and I need to make sure I'm following up with the interesting people I've met. And I need to make sure I clearly understand why I want to follow up with them. If you've spoken to 20 people and 18 of them were boring and 2 were fascinating, don't bother with the 18 boring people, because you're not going to get re-energized by talking to them individually, but you might get energized by talking to those 2 people over and over again. And that's quite important. It's not about numbers, it's about depth. So one other thing I wanted to touch on before we close the workshop is alternative methods of networking. And we've actually touched on that already. There was a question from Louise about how to reach out to people in the office. And I've touched on the fact that for me, this workshop is a networking activity. So I would encourage you to do things rather than talk. So do things together, find projects that you want to pursue, get involved with volunteering activities, find someone in your workplace who's involved with a charity and you find it fascinating and you want to become a volunteer. Find a project which is linked to diversity and inclusion that you find interesting and you want to get involved with. You will find that the more you do and the more you get involved, the more people reach out to you. So you don't actually need to actively seek out the networking activities. The networking activities come to you. And you know, you could get to the stage where actually you need to say, stop, that's enough, I'm doing too much, which I'm going through it right now at the moment, because I'm getting approached more than I'm reaching out to people. So do rather than talk. try to do things together, even if it's just, say, an E2W event where you know someone who would be an interesting guest and you're doing that in partnership with another member. That's great. That's a fantastic bonding activity. And again, you're gonna establish that relationship, and this is gonna trigger a very, very virtuous circle in terms of engaging and deepening your relationship with those people you're doing things with. We've kind of been through everything I wanted to touch on. Are there any comments or question for me? I just want to reiterate that I'm not a networking guru. There's actually people who do a lot more networking in this group. Marion is one of them. So yeah, I wanted to hear from you guys as well. Like Lilia, you've already shared your experience. Marion, you do quite a bit of it. Katie, Mark, obviously, you guys are having to do quite a bit of networking. How are you finding going back to face-to-face? Katie, you've already said that it was difficult, but are you finding the headspace to do it again? Are you finding the time to do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, when we've got things organized, you kind of prepare yourself, as you say, preparation, knowing what we want to get out of it. And ultimately for me, it's finding out from the members or from the community what I can do from them, for them, sorry. But like you say, sometimes it's a bit of an overload. So you come away from it feeling you've got all these different ideas, but you're so kind of, you know, overstimulated that it's difficult to then bring them back and actually put them into some kind of practical place. So yeah, it's a work in progress, but yeah.
How do you process all of that? What's your method? I have a spreadsheet for everything, but sometimes a bit ridiculous. So it just sits in my head, and that's when you get into overheating mode. Yeah, see, I'm a bit of an enigma because I don't really like planning too much. I don't like spreadsheets. I don't like too much detail. So I tend to just scribble it down on a piece of paper to kind of get it out of my brain and then try and act on it immediately, whether it's following up with someone or arranging a call with someone. And it kind of, yeah, there's some kind of method to my madness, but I don't do spreadsheets or anything like that. Okay. Yeah, there might be different method for different people. Spreadsheet is not everyone's cup of tea.
And on the LinkedIn point earlier, there is one thing maybe which is worth doing is after a meeting or after, even if there is no follow-up or you don't really know yet what the relationship with that person will be, or it's to connect on LinkedIn straight away because it's hot, it's warm, you don't know exactly if there will be an opportunity to continue that relationship or not, but at least it's locked in, it's in the network. And then when another ID comes up, you say, oh, we met 2 months ago at that event. I wanted to check with you something or to pick your brain on something or whatever. But it's good when it's hot to connect, to be connected so that you don't lose that connection. Because I don't like the idea of saying she or he might be useful, but it's a little bit that I don't know really what to do with that relationship at the moment, but I'm sure there will be something coming up at some point, but I don't know what it is yet.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you may be surprised. Maybe 2 years down the line, this overlap. The overlap is not obvious immediately.
And obviously, the more connections you have, that person will not refuse you because they've already met or they know where it's coming from. So you don't even need to send a note in a way or to have a reason. And then when a couple of, and then you will probably see the network of that person come across another person, etc., and build your LinkedIn network through that. So the more connection you have, the easier it is to connect to other people because people will accept a connection request based on the other people that you know and that they know. That's what I do generally. Yeah. I think, oh, this person can be trusted because she knows X, Y, Z that I know. Therefore, I'm okay to accept her or him because even though I don't know him or her.